Welcome to another edition of Voice of the Diaspora. In studio with me today is a very special guest. He's the host of 107.1 FM, a long-standing political activist, a very experienced political activist who has his finger on the button when it comes to issues about Guyana, issues affecting Guyana. He has his ear to the ground. And Mark Benschop is here with me to talk about the Nigel Dharamlall rape case. So much has been happening, and today you have the opportunity to hear from one of Guyana's leading political activists and rights advocate, Mark Anthony Benschop. Mark Anthony Benschop, welcome to Voice of the Diaspora.
Good evening, Norman, and I say good evening because it's evening where you are, and of course, good afternoon where I am to everyone. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us. I know you have a busy schedule. This is a last minute invite, and you would have suspended activities with your kids, your children, that is, to join this program. And it speaks to the commitment in this struggle that you have always availed yourself to, that you have always committed your time to ensure that people are informed about what is happening in Guyana. Welcome again to the program. And before we go into the matter at hand, the issue that we will discuss, say hello to the viewers and say something, you know.
Just again, thank you for having me, and thank you for inviting me. And of course, it's always a pleasure to be talking through your platform to your audience and to many of those who are eager to hear at least the other side of the coin, sorry, as to what's happening in Guyana. And so, again, good evening and good afternoon to all of your listeners.
Okay, so Colin Barnwell and a number of others are tuning in. Minette Sion, Winston Henry, and of course, people are tuning in again. They're patient. And so, Mark, look, the Nigel Darmlal case, the rape and sodomy, the sodomizing, sorry, of a 16-year-old schoolgirl. That case was brought to the attention of the president of Guyana some weeks ago. The young woman would have written to him for help, and it was pushed on the back burner until yourself and other activists would have come out publicly and made that call that there should be justice for that 16-year-old Amerindian girl. From then to now, we have seen the machinations of the People's Progressive Party to ensure that the case does not reach the light of day, that the young woman does not get justice, and that Nigel Darmalal goes free to return to the Ministry of Local Government and Regional Development after this heinous crime would have been committed. What are your thoughts looking at the case from the start? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's unfortunate that it has reached to the stage where we are hearing that the little girl no longer want to pursue the matter, which for me is rather questionable at this time, the way in which it happened. The police, the head of the police force, they have a lot of explaining to do. The DPP has a lot of explaining to do. And those who were entrusted in terms of her safety, they have a lot of they have a lot to say to the general public as to what really transpired. Many of us in the public domain understand the nature of the PPPC when it comes to corruption. And it was pretty obvious that they will certainly go at all lengths to ensure that they corrupt the process. And even if it has to intimidate the victim intimidate her relatives, and even some sort of monetary inducement. This little girl, and with all due respect to her, she just didn't get up overnight and say, "Look, I no longer want to pursue." We all saw that she was being very strong. We all saw that she was prepared, all length to go out and ensure that she gets justice. Then suddenly we're hearing, and mind you, we're just hearing this from the police. We're not hearing it from anyone else because it appears that this is exactly what the police wanted to do, to get this matter over with and done. And because of that, they had a political obligation to fulfill. And that obligation is to ensure that they protect Dharamlall. And protecting Dharamlall for them is protecting the PPP. The crime chief, who is said to be in place to become the next commissioner of police. And maybe soon we will be hearing that announcement. It's either him or one other individual. But what we do know is that the acting commissioner of police should be on vacation, I'm sorry, retirement very, very soon. And so there is this race now to perform for the PPP to see who is best suited for the next commissioner of police to become the next commissioner of police. And so the investigation was stymied in the process in the beginning. They knew that they had some political work to do. They knew that when they submitted the file to the DPP, that the file was questionable. The DPP knew that. They continued to stall the process for about 2, 3 days. Then we heard that the DPP sent the file back to the police. It was all a game. It was a political game they were playing, and they were attempting to brainwash the people. And in the process, we were hearing from individuals who thought that we are all a bunch of backward people, that they feel they can jump because they have a microphone and maybe some sort of whatever credibility out there, that they can say to individuals, let us don't talk about this Nigel Dharamlal's case. Let us don't debate it. Let us not have an opinion. Let us just shut up and allow the system to work. The system has worked, but not in favor of the people, not in favor of justice, not in favor of the victim. The system has worked in favor of the corrupt. And that is what it has been, and it will continue to be that way until that broken, corrupt justice system is fixed.
Thank you, Mark Benschop here on Voice of the Diaspora. So many people are tuning in at the moment. Mark, I want you to, if you will, to outline to our viewers the trauma that the 16-year-old child, school child, went through, allegedly at the hand of the Minister of Local Government, Nigel Dharamlall. We heard that she was raped and sodomized, verbally abused, and and went through so much. In your words, as a political activist, someone who would have actually suffered on the People's Progressive Party, uh, outline to us what are your thoughts on what she went through, what you would have gathered.
Well, Norman, I can just imagine what she would have, or what she's going through at this point in time, knowing that her rights were betrayed, knowing that she was taken advantage of. She's 16 years old. He is, as we say in Guyana, a big old hardback man with a 16-year-old. And it appears, based on the evidence that we saw, what was presented, and what we can assume that is evidence, that he started allegedly grooming this girl when she was 15 or maybe 14, I don't know. And then he struck at her when she became 16, which is the legal age for sexual consent in Guyana. And so, based on the description from the young lady, what transpired, one can only imagine. She spoke about the fact that she's under 100 pounds. He is about 200 pounds. And you can just imagine. and the description, it was very graphic for a little girl or an old man like Dharamlal. Based on the allegations, one can only imagine what she has gone through physically, what she's going through mentally and psychologically. Those scars are going to remain with her for her entire lifetime. And no amount of money, no amount of promises or sweet deals or whatever can ever repair the damage done to that little girl. Compliments of Nigel Dharamlal, compliments of the judicial system, compliments of the PPP regime, and compliments of those who were part and parcel of this big diabolical conspiracy to ensure that no justice is done as it pertains to this little girl. And now I say all of this based on what we can say is the evidence that was actually presented out there in public domain. So based on that evidence, we can just imagine what she is going through at this point in time. She has been violated, according to her and allegedly by Nigel Darmlal. She's now been violated by the Guyana Police Force. She has been violated by the DPP. She has been violated by the political system and the entire justice system in Guyana. So, violation all around.
There has been, Mark, thank you for that, violation all around. There's been national attention on the development where one of Guyana's most popular attorney at law, Nigel Hughes, would have been called to represent the rape accused government minister Nigel Dharamlall. Nigel Hughes, was retained by the rape accused to defend him, and we saw protests outside of his law firm, Hughes Fields and Stobie, and we saw women asking him to discontinue defending Mr. Nigel Dharamlall, who we understand is accused not only of this case, this allegation of the 16-year-old being raped by him, but by a number of other young women who are alleging that they would have faced similar abuse. What are your thoughts on Attorney at Law Nigel Hughes taking up that case?
Well, it comes as a surprise to me, and I'm sure it is a surprise to scores of other folks who know Nigel. And I know Nigel at what I would say at a personal, capacity. I've known Nigel over 20 years. Nigel has been, and probably we can still view him, as a lawyer who stands on the side of victims, whether it's political victims, whether it's those become victims of other circumstances. Nigel has always been, for the most part, from a legal standpoint, on the side of victims. This matter is a high profile political matter that has to do with a high profile political individual, one whom I would describe as notorious, one whom I described as very disrespectful towards women, disrespectful towards the position that he holds. We have seen him on numerous occasions in Parliament, not just with the dildo comment, disrespecting a female member, and not only just a female member in the opposition, member of Parliament, but all of the opposition members of Parliament, they are females, and the entire female population in Guyana. This accused, Nigel Dharamlall, should have no position or should hold no position in any government, whether they're installed, whether they're there illegally or not. He's not fit for any public position. Having said that, the fact that Nigel is known to be in communities across Guyana, He seems to have a passion for indigenous rights. He frequents the indigenous communities as well. And he has always been speaking out in terms of violations against Guyanese, yes, but also our indigenous brothers and sisters. And so it baffled me when I saw and I heard the news that Nigel actually took that case. Um, Majority of folks are disappointed. I am disappointed because there is absolutely no justification in Nigel taking that case, none whatsoever. I agree that as a lawyer, Nigel, that is, or any lawyer, has a right to take a case. Any case, they have a right to take that case. But any lawyer also has that right not to accept that case. And Nigel accepted that case, knowing very well there will be serious repercussion coming from mainly opposition supporters who um, are rather surprised again that Nigel took up that position. And in my opinion, Nigel's explanation is it's just not acceptable. I'm not going to sit here and throw Nigel under the bus. I'm not going to sit here and try to denounce him in any manner that would give the PPP reason to say that we are quick to throw individuals under the bus. I am grateful for the many times Nigel has represented me, an accused, political accused, on numerous occasions. And there's nothing wrong with standing up and on the side of political accused, folks who are being persecuted under an oppressed regime. But again, without repeating myself, I am deeply surprised and disappointed that Nigel Hughes would want to represent, of all person, someone like Nigel Dharamlall. The PPP has so many lawyers. A lot of them are low-level lawyers, yes, but why couldn't they go to one of those lawyers to represent him? They have many of them. Priya is a lawyer. Datadin is a lawyer. They love to represent people. Why Nigel Hughes? And why did Nigel Hughes accept that case? We are disappointed, very disappointed in Nigel Hughes.
Very disappointed in Nigel Hughes. Why did he accept that case? Mark Benschop, during the course of his representation, he publicly stated that the system has to work. Um, uh, 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 he said, I think, as a justification to his representation to the rape accused, Nigel Dharamlall, he said that the system has to work. Nigel Hughes, is a former politician. He understands the culture of politics in Guyana. What is your view on that public pronouncement, knowing that he understands the background and the nature of politics in Guyana? What is your view when Nigel comes out to say to the general public that we must allow the system to work?
Yeah, I don't know. Nigel, of all persons, should know better. Um Nigel Hughes, that is. The system is broken. The system doesn't work, especially when the PPP is in office. They oppress people. They violate people's rights. Nigel Hughes of all persons should know that under the PPPC, the system doesn't work. Nigel has said that, I believe, only because Dharamlal, the rape accused, is his client. And I would assume that Nigel said that thinking that people were just going to listen to him and put their hands up and say, okay, Nigel, you said let the system work, let's lay back and see what happens. I think people saw that as a disrespect coming from Nigel Hughes, knowing then that social media and especially social and political activists and rights activists have always been out there, human rights activists, talking about issues, especially when uh, there is no hope for justice. I'm not sure why Nigel would say and ask that uh, let the system work. The system is broken. How can a broken system work? I don't know uh, what was going through Mr. Nigel Hughes's mind at that time. But Nigel knows the system is broken. Nigel knows it doesn't work. Occasionally, there might be a little victory here and there, but 99% of the times, the system doesn't work, especially for the ordinary man, especially for poor people. And what we have there right now is a system only for the likes of a Dharamlall and Irfan Ali and Jack Deere and those folks. That's when the system works, but it doesn't work for poor people. Whether it's a poor Indian, whether it's poor indigenous, whether it's poor African, it just doesn't work for poor people. Nigel knows that. Nigel Hughes, that is.
Nigel Hughes knows that. Mark Benschop, you have had a long sojourn. You continue along that road of political activism, of highlighting injustices against the oppressed in Guyana. We saw the DPP sending back the case to the police, for the file to the police for further investigation. Many people are saying that the director of public prosecutions, Miss Shalimar Hack, is in the pocket or under the control of the People's Progressive Party, in particular Barra Jagdeo, who calls the shots. Um, when you saw that file being sent back to the police, and subsequently the police saying that the young lady, the 16-year-old Amerindian girl, school girl, no longer wanted this matter to be continued, do you think that there were other external factors that would have caused that situation to arise, in which the DPP sent back the file and the police saying that the girl didn't want any more, didn't want to continue, and so on? What are your thoughts on that?
As indicated earlier, the girl has been violated, not just by, based on the allegations, not just by Nigel Dharamlall, who, based on the allegations, brutally raped her and sodomized her, but the system did the same to her. And when I say the system did the same to her, that includes the DPP chambers, because the DPP chambers, based on the law and based on what and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not going to pretend that I'm a lawyer. You're only a lawyer when you pass your bar exam
Yeah.
and you are practicing, and I'm just not. However, um, based on the evidence presented, I think there was sufficient evidence there in which to proceed with a rape charge against Nigel Dharamlall. If you check other, I'm sure, other rape cases in Guyana, and you compare those files with the file that was sent to the DPP with Nigel Dharamlal's file, uh, your listeners would see exactly what I'm talking about. I am almost certain that there are folks who were charged with rape with far less evidence when compared to what we in public have learned about Nigel Dharamlal's actions, alleged actions. When you compare those files, and you would see that there was sufficient evidence to institute a charge of rape against Nigel Dharamlal. The fact that, who would rush if it is accurate, and his lawyer, Mr. Nigel Hughes, nobody denied that there was a changing of the color of his room, uh, Dharamlal's room, freshly painted. Nobody denied those allegations at all. Um, there was no denial of him knowing the young girl. There was no denial of him having sexual intercourse. At least I haven't seen it. What we saw, though, was a statement coming out of the commander, who said that the young lady no longer want to proceed with the matter. All these things point in the direction of, in my opinion, sufficient reason as to why the DPP should have instituted a charge of rape against Nigel Dharamlal and let it go to the magistrate. Let us have a
Let the
PI,
courts decide.
a preliminary inquiry, and if during or at the end of the preliminary inquiry, based on the evidence presented, if there is insufficient evidence to throw the matter up to the High Court, then, as oftentimes we see, or whoever is lucky, they get their case just thrown out. Lack of evidence. It is not for the DPP chambers to do that. In answering your question, as it pertains to whether the DPP is in anybody's control or whatever, there is sufficient evidence out there for John and Jane Public to harbor that perception that the DPP, Ms. Shalimar Haque, is not interested in justice, is not interested in what is called a balance, a fair dispensation of justice. And it appears as though, and that is the perception out there by the public, that she is using her office to ensure that those who are with political connections and those who have money, the likes of Azruddin Mohammed and others, and the political guys like a Dharamlall, like a Irfan Ali, and these other guys are not charged at all, and certain other individuals. If any person who sits in that office as DPP is using their office for that to protect those set of individuals and only target the poor people, then people got to harbor those sort of perception. And when that sort of perception is harbored, it is very difficult not to believe that the DPP is using her office as a political tool and a pawn for those big, high and mighty so-called business people in Guyana. And with that, I say, maybe it is time, or not maybe, the time has come for the DPP to be removed from office.
The time
If
has
that is
come.
possible or not, she's got to be removed from office.
The
She's
time
violating she's violating the rights of citizens in that country. And I say shame on the DPP.
appear to be severely compromised. I want to go to this clip before I ask you my other question, because you would have outlined to your viewers on your program, the Mark Benschop Show, on 107.1 FM, something that is tickling me too. The way the PPP supporters react to the oppression, to the suppression, to the brutality, to the injustices that are visited on non supporters of the PPP. We see it on our platforms, we see it in the public domain, we see that senseless sort of response, that uncaring response to the, to the persecution and even murders of people who are not PPP supporters. And you would have mentioned that on your program. And of course, you would have graphically outlined what happened to that young lady. Let's go to this clip. It will take a minute. We can have a glass of water or so on, viewers. But let us hear what Mark Benschop ought to say on 107.1 FM, Mark Benschop Radio, online.
Shot to death by the police. Majority of our Indian brothers and sisters love that. Majority of the PPP supporters love that. They love it. They enjoy it. We see it in the comments of some of these so-called blogs, so-called PPP newspapers. We see it. We see it every day. We see it. We see it. We see it. But these are the same folks who defend an alleged rapist. They're defending this guy. For them is this guy deserves a fair trial. This guy, we shouldn't be we shouldn't be speaking about this guy. We shouldn't be doing anything. We should sit back, we should shut up and allow the system to work. Allow the system to work. That's according to these folks. But they didn't allow the system to work with that guy that they shot and killed under questionable circumstances. They didn't. What if the police had shot and killed this guy? What if? What if? That's the question. After all, he's a suspect of a very serious crime committed against a 16-year-old girl. He's accused of a serious crime committed against a 16-year-old girl. But the PPP supporters are jumping for joy because the police shot and killed a suspect. And some of these folks, again, want the system to work. They believe in the system. They take people for pakus. And then some of them don't even want us to discuss the Nigel Dharamlall rape matter. Oh, we shouldn't discuss it. Oh, no, we shouldn't discuss it. Oh, no, give me a break. This is what the little girl is saying. And I want these folks in the PPP to hear. She says, this was my first time, and I was in a lot of pain because he was very rough. He never asked me if this is what I wanted. Critical part here. He never asked me if this is what I wanted. I was in a blur, and my mind was blank. This is coming from a 16-year-old girl. I'm not sure if this is part of the report that was submitted to the DPP. We will get to that shortly. And now let me continue with what the alleged victim, 16-year-old rape victim, is saying. She says, I was in a blur and my mind was blank. She's 16, forget. Look, she says, I am 5 feet 3 inches, weighing less than 100 pounds. Less than 100 pounds. A note, and this is for the PPP supporters. Less than 100 pounds. Less than 100 pounds. This man is about 5 feet 7 inches and over 200 pounds. He was dominating me. After a while, he said, I want you to turn around or turn over. And he sort of rolled me over, and he did continue with the vaginal sex. For a short while, then I felt him going for anal. It started paining right away. I told him to stop. I was in so much pain. I was screaming for him to stop. The anal sex was worse than the vaginal sex. But he didn't stop. As he was over me, I couldn't do anything but pierce my nails into his hands while enduring that pain. It was terrible. And he told me to shut up and not make noise because my brother will hear. That's according
Mark Benschop there on 107.1 FM speaking to his viewers, thousands and thousands of them. He has outlined what the young lady would have put in a statement that she sent to President Irfan Ali that he refused initially to address until activists came out and exposed that he was in receipt of that correspondence. Mark, I wanted to carry that clip because I want my viewers to understand what that child, I am saying a child, a school child, went through. A child who had never, as I understand it, been exposed to sexual intercourse. A young lady who had her virginity at 16. You know what hurts me? That this is a young lady that is beautiful, that at the age of 16 being raised by good parents in a society where we know lawlessness happens, and she kept herself. She was a virgin, Mark, when this monster groomed her, pressured her, broke her, and subsequently violate her. And when I listen to your narration of that statement, the way you delivered it, I want to ask you, how did that affect you? You are a father, you are an activist, you have been feeling for people who have been persecuted, people who have been abused, people who have been violated, and so on. But you are also a father, Mark. When you would have examined this case, when all of the information would have been there privy to you to peruse, how did you feel, Mark Benschop?
As a parent, I have a little daughter, and all of us. This ought to affect all of us as parents, and not only parents, adults. It has to affect all of us because this is a little girl that comes from a village. And it takes a village to raise a child. And we can just imagine that that little girl is from within our village. And it will take someone who is very um, stone hearted, so to speak, not to have this based on what the little girl described, that it wouldn't have any sort of effect on us. And again, one can only imagine what that little girl has endured and what she is going through right now. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I don't want to say that I can get deep within her mind right now, but as a father, as a human being, we can all just imagine what she's enduring at this point in time. Um, and so, having said that, and based on my activism in Guyana, I have personally dealt with some of these matters with underage girls. And here is where we go again to say that the system cannot work. The system is broken, the system is corrupt, and we have seen the evidence more under the PPPC regime, because this is a regime headed by a set of corrupt individuals who are unpatriotic. They don't believe in the justice system unless they can control and corrupt the justice system. That includes the judiciary, and it includes the army, it includes the Guyana police force as well. And we see these things every single day. So this is not propaganda that's being spewed here on your show. The facts are there, the evidence is there for all to see. Only those who are diehard PPP members can see it because they're blind when it comes to the truth. And so when it comes to justice and when it comes to fighting for justice, if the individual is not part of them, whether by ethnicity, for the most part, because we do see a lot of Indian brothers and sisters who came out against what has happened to this little girl. So I don't want to paint all individuals in that with that same brush. But what we see though is those diehard individuals, what we call on my program the trench crapos, are the ones who are so uh, blind that they can't see past the propaganda of the PPPC. And so For the 20 something years, the evidence was there that the system was broken and that they are not going to go and fight for justice when it comes to victims like this little girl who has been violated and other little girls in the country or little boys. They have there someone who is supposedly a minister by the name of Kwame McCoy, allegations that he has violated a 15-year-old schoolboy. Nothing at all. And the allegations of other members of the PPPC who have violated people, and nothing has happened. Some of them are sitting right there in parliament. Some of them are in the cabinet of the regime. Some of them are part and parcel of other agencies of which they're heads of, and so forth. So nothing is going to happen under this PPP regime. And anyone who sits in the public or on social media or on the media and call on citizens to have faith and sit back and trust the justice system, I'll question those individuals. It doesn't matter who it is. I'll question the objective of that individual and whether that individual means it or individuals mean it, or they just saying that because they have a client to represent or they have some personal interest in. And this is not directed only to Mr. Nigel Hughes, who is a friend of mine, and I believe will continue to be a friend of mine. It is just so that in this particular situation, I am just disappointed with him when he said, let the system work. Let the system work. That hurts all of us. It hurts not just those of us who are activists, it hurts the entire Guyanese population when we have people are saying, let the system work. The system didn't work for the Orrin Boston's family. It didn't work for the Bacchus family, that little boy that got killed on the East Coast. It didn't work for the Henry cousins. It didn't work for the other little boy that was killed, Singh. It didn't work for the people of Linden. 3 Lindeners were murdered under the PPP regime. It didn't work. It didn't work for Ronald Waddle, who was assassinated under the PPPC regime. It didn't work for the Sashsaw family.
Courtney Crummy Wing.
It didn't work for Courtney Crummy Wing. The system doesn't work. The system works only when 19 fraud charges were discontinued. 19 fraud charges, the man who sits there under questionable circumstances as the president of Guyana. 19 fraud charges. The system worked then. Anil Nandalal walked out of the Attorney General chambers with law books belonging to taxpayers of this country, of Guyana. Taxpayers. No one has that authority, legal authority, to instruct him to take those law books. But yet he claimed that Donald Ramotar told him he could take it. In any other part of the world, democratic part of the world, Anil Nandalal would have had to do serious jail time for theft. But only in Guyana these things happen, that the system works for only these people. A little kid out in Albaiston or Port Morant or Blackbush or Eversham or Alnis or Philippi or Linden or Kokwani or Ituni or Bartica or Lethem, a little kid, poor kid, is going to get caught with a little spliff. A little spliff. The system wouldn't work then. You know how many young brothers are currently in Camp Street prisons, Luziknan or New Amsterdam, and even women for a little spliff. The system didn't work for them then. There was no system. A lot of brothers and sisters are currently incarcerated, all because the system didn't work for them. The system was so unfair to them that they're currently either serving time because of a corrupt system, because of corrupt police officers who planted evidence on them, or they're sitting there still in prison, awaiting trial for a long period of time because the system didn't work for them. A lot of them weren't given the opportunity for station bail or even any sort of bail from the magistrate's court. They are remanded to prison. But no, the system only works for people like Nigel Dharamlall because of his political connection. The system works for him where he is not handcuffed, where he's not placed in shackles, where he's not put in the lockups, and where he's not given that special treatment, so to speak, of 72 hours. But no, the system only works for him. The system didn't work for Roxanne Myers, who was shackled, placed in handcuffs, and in the lockups for 72 hours. The system didn't work for Trevor Ben. The system didn't work for Lowenfield and Mingo and scores of others. No, the system didn't work for them because they're not entitled to that sort of fair treatment under the system. The system didn't work for others who have been persecuted under this PPP regime. Oh, no, the system doesn't work. The system didn't work for Tokuma Gunsi, a frivolous charge against Mr. Gunsi. It didn't work when they arrested him and placed him in shackles. It didn't work for him and put him there in the lockups for 72 hours. It didn't work for all of those people. But we must sit back and wait for the system to work. For Nigel Dharamlall, who was swiftly sent home on $1 million bail, station bail, whether he paid it or not is a different story. His passport was not taken away. He was not told by the police to return every day until the matter is investigation is completed. No, the system doesn't work for majority of poor Guyanese. It doesn't work, and it doesn't work for those whom the PPP believe that should be persecuted. It doesn't work. And look how long Roxanne Myers and Lowenfield and Mingo and Trevor Ben. Look how long, over 3 years now. And their matter is still in the magistrate's court. Every time they turn up to court, the prosecutors are not ready. Oh, they're not ready. They're not ready. They're not ready for over 3 years. But yet, they want us to believe that the system works. The system is broken, the system is corrupt, and the system is racist under the PPP regime.
Mark Benschop here on Voice of the Diaspora. 48 minutes, 29 seconds into the program. We're fastly reaching the hour mark, and we're winding down now. Mark Benschop, as eloquent, as passionate, as careful and concise in what he's saying, but very, very clear on what has been happening under this regime. Of course, the system did not work for Mark Benschop, who spent 5 years in solitary confinement on trumped-up charges of treason under the directive of Barra Jagdeo, the same Barra Jagdeo who is the de facto president posing as vice president in Guyana and calling the shot. It has been too long that one man has had a stranglehold over this nation and continues to have a stranglehold over this nation, whether in legitimate power or outside of the leadership of the country, while having the leadership of the country through the back doors. Mark Benschop here on Voice of the Diaspora, a host of 107.1 FM and a long-standing political activist who is consistent, who has a nightly program 5 days a week on 107.1 FM. You can find that program on Mark Benschop's Facebook page, and of course on Radio 107.1 FM. Mark Benschop here on Voice of the Diaspora. We're winding down now. I have to ask you this question. You said in a post on your Facebook very recently, you said you asked the president of Guyana a question. Let me go back to you on the screen before I bring that up. You asked the president of Guyana a question. But someone said to me this morning, a senior journalist in Guyana, said to me, you know, that person said, the PPP is a rape and bugger party. That in that party, you have so many functionaries at the highest level, at the middle level, and below that are engaged in terrible immoralities and lawlessness. And therefore, there can be no justice for people who suffer, innocent people who suffer, at the hands of those who sit in that government in positions of power. I want to go to a question that you courageously asked the president of Guyana, Irfan Ali. I want to go to that question, and I want our viewers to see it. And our viewers can see it now. Mark Benschop 1 day ago. Dear Irfan Ali, in brackets, installed PPP president, if you agree to take a lie detector test on whether you knowingly had sex with a minor, 13, 14, or 15-year-old, or any underage girl from Bollywood Disco and Hotel Kitty during the time you were Minister of Housing, I, Mark Anthony Benschop, will stop referring to you and your regime as installed and illegal. Over to you, Irfan. Hashtag lie detector test. Wondering. You asked that question, and I wanted to ask you on this program for the world to see, for my viewers to see and to hear. Why that question?
Well, it's a relevant question, and comes out of the heels of the fact that, in my view, and I'm sure scores of folks who are watching this show right now would agree, that the appearance is there and it is blatant that Irfan Ali was protecting someone who is accused of a serious crime of raping a 16-year-old girl, accused of that crime. And the way in which the president pronounced on the matter um, got me thinking as to whether, and I say the president, and usually I don't say that, but I take that back because people should know by now I don't recognize the PPP regime as a legitimate government. And so, by extension, I don't recognize Irfan Ali as a legitimate president. But the way in which he pronounced on the matter caused me to have some eyebrows raised as to whether he was basically protecting um, Nigel Dharamlall from this serious accusation. And it's merely a question put forward that if, in fact, because uh, he wasn't an angel when he was the Minister of Housing, people have accused him, including a pandit from Essequibo, I believe, who accused him of cursing the pandit out and disrespecting the pandit and all manner of things, and allegations that he cursed people and chased them out of his office when he was Minister of Housing. He never treated people with any sort of respect. And so it led me to ask a simple question based on the fact that it is my opinion that he's protecting someone who's accused of a crime a serious crime against a little girl, which is rape. And instead of right off the bat remove Nigel Dharamlall from office, he waited until Dharamlal made the decision. Oh, Nigel said that he wants to be removed, and I agree with Nigel. No. You, as the so-called president of Guyana, should have swiftly removed Nigel Dharamlal and not just find ways to protect Nigel. And that is what Irfan Ali was actually doing. Hence my reason to say, well, look, something isn't right here. But if Irfan Ali is willing to take a lie detector test, and this is not accusing him that he has done anything wrong. But if someone were to ask me to take such a lie detector test, I will rightly and readily, whether publicly or not, ready for that lie detector test to be taken. And that's all I was just merely trying to point out, that why is he trying to cover up? Why is he trying to protect Nigel Dharamlal? Is there more to it? Is there more? Is he like Nigel? I'm not saying that, Dharamlal. I'm not saying that, but look at how we defended. Look at how we protected Nigel Dharamlal. Eyebrows should be raised. Hence my post. That's all.
Mark
At least
Benschop,
for
Mark Benschop here on Voice of the Diaspora. 56 minutes, 28 seconds into the program. We are actually wrapping up now. We will have Mark's closing remarks. We're fastly reaching the hour mark with Mark here on Voice of the Diaspora. Of course, our viewers are tuning. There's so many comments. I am putting some of them on the screen. Desiree Simmons just said, if the PPP elite could keep their lawlessness among themselves, then that's okay. But to impose their vulgarity on the citizens of Guyana is unforgivable. Desiree Simmons, one of our constant, viewers on your show and on my show, and a woman who is in tune with what is happening in Guyana and has an opinion that can lend to educating a lot of us and ensuring that we can use those opinions to craft change in Guyana. Desiree Simmons will always be welcome in this program. Mark, as I said, we are closing now. 57 minutes, 42 seconds into the program. 3 minutes left. Your closing remarks.
first, let me thank you for inviting me on your platform, and I appreciate the fact that we were able to have a discourse in a very straightforward way. And I am on your platform, and I respect your platform. And if you notice, I my mannerism, waiting on you to pose your questions and respond to you based on the question asked. And I believe that the discourse has gone in a very respectful and professional
Thank you.
manner. And hoping that the next time you're on my platform, we can have the same very professional and
Thank
very
you.
uh, quiet discourse with each other, as I respect your platform. Having said that, I want to thank also your viewers, your listeners. My closing remarks is that we have to be careful with those who pretend to be with us, who would come on our platforms and want to comment about things when it is not in favor of the PPPC. We know who those few people are. Some of them are like one Wesley Curtin and others who eat the king's meat. They're out there eating the king's meat. And then when we say something that they don't like, then they come to challenge us. They don't say anything at all when it comes to Guyanese being persecuted. They don't say anything when it comes to the corruption by the PPPC regime and those in the private sector commission and so forth and so on. They remain quiet. Those are the house slaves that we have to be very careful of. And with that, it's Saturday afternoon. I don't want to bore your listeners with anything else other than just we've got to be careful with those individuals. And one more thing, though, Mr. Brown, if you'd allow me,
Yes,
and
you
I'm
go
glad
ahead.
that,
Go ahead, Marco.
and I'm kind of liking this tone. Where I'm kind of liking this tone, Mr. Brown,
Thank
very
you.
much so.
Thank you so
Um,
much.
Thank you, Norman. And I want to see this sort of Norman on Benchop Radio too. But thank you. Um, Individuals who are PNC members and believe that because they campaign during the course of an election, that if they are not given a position to serve, then they are going to walk away. They are going to walk away. They are going to uh, threaten to quit and resign, all because of not being placed in a position. And I think that for me is a no no. That you don't campaign, you don't go in a party to be campaigning, and then when you don't get a position, you run away, or you threaten to quit, or you threaten to go and put on a red T-shirt, as what we may see somebody doing shortly, and these sort of things. It shows that their hearts are not really that close, and it bothers me. You know, again, I can go on and on with this closing remarks. But it's Saturday afternoon. I know you want to go and knock your little two Guinness, and I don't want to take that away from
No,
you, Mister
no,
Brown.
no. Not at this time. These are serious times, and I
Thank
recognize that you have taken the opportunity from your busy schedule to get to be here. And Mark, I am deeply appreciative of your presence, and I think that our conversation tonight illustrates what obtains going forward. I want to thank you so much for being here on Voice of the Diaspora. Of course, it is a pleasure to have someone of your caliber and social standing here, a renowned political activist, over 30 years, someone who has been in the struggle, in the forefront of the struggle at times, at the front of the struggle, alone when no one else would have been there. You have made history in political activism, and your relevance remains today. It is a pleasure to be sitting with you here today, this evening, on Voice of the Diaspora. 1 hour, 2 minutes, 49 seconds. Mark, thank you for being here. Thanks to my viewers, Brenda Casey, Desiree Simmons, the whole lot of you for joining the program. And until next time, tomorrow I should be having Simona Brooms and Rickford Burke on the program. Hopefully, we will be talking about this same issue, among other things. Mark Benschop, continue the good work. And to my viewers, Mark is on Mark Anthony Benschop Facebook page. You can find him on 107.1 FM. And let us share our platforms as we continue this struggle to bring down a dictatorship that is destroying Guyana by the second. Mark, thank you for being here on Voice of the Diaspora. And thank you to
you.
my
Good night.
viewers. Good night.
Thank you.